Welcome, my friends. Welcome to Inspiring You. If we've ever met, I'm Henry. So, my friends, all the transmissions shared here are received directly through my Oversoul Sahara, my soul aligned higher self, Aurelia, and my assigned collective guidance light team, including Arcturian frequency technicians, the Christ at Earth, the Good Keepers, Yeshua, Mary Magdalene, Thoth, Archangel Michael, Kali Sahara, and the Spirit Doctor team, each attuned to pure source light and the reclamation of sovereign soul pathways. This is a resonance field. So, this is a stabilized architecture where, if you choose through your free will, your soul's true signal is held, recognized, and allowed to become practical in form. And with that, my friends, however way you're listening or showing up through the podcast, through YouTube, or on Patreon, whatever way, or simply just being open to receiving the light transmission through presence for the highest good, your field is already participating in the way that is aligned for your highest good. You are working with your own soul over soul collective guidance light team. So there is nothing imposed, nothing forced, nothing is pushed into form before it is ready. Only what supports your highest good and your human working with your soul agreement, body, nervous system, free will, and stabilized light format is invited to participate with ease, grace, harmony. So let's get into it, my friends. June 2026. So, June 2026, this is the June 2026 energy forecast. And so, what does that carry? So, June 2026 carries the frequency of non negotiable reality, what cannot move forward as it is. Y'all, I've never heard the guides be very blunt in this way in an energy forecast. They have been blunt many times to me. Yet oftentimes the energy forecast, there is a softness. And so I thought it was really interesting. And I asked numerous times about the overall theme. And they just kept showing up with non-negotiable reality, what cannot move forward as it is. And the embodiment key is arc of structural continuation from visible reorganization to structural light truth. And then the arc context is arc of structural residency, format year 2, becoming legible to the field without adjusting tone. So this month is direct. And the guides shared many times in relationship to this that it's not about being harsh, it's not punishing, it's not dramatic. It is direct. And oftentimes Oviso Sahariel will share, it is precise in the language. And so it is direct. I will say there's a moment though in the humaning you're like, wait, what? But it's direct, it's precise. And June does not open with the same softness as May. May was about visible reorganization. May was about reality beginning to take shape around the stabilized signal. And if you are new here, stabilized signal, I'm speaking about the soul. So May was about the first visible stage of response becoming form. June is different. June begins asking what within that form can actually continue and what requires repair, what needs clearer terms, what has completed, what is costing too much, what has only remained active because your nervous system, energy, attention, or overfunctioning has continued funding it. I sat with this theme for quite a bit. I mean, it actually came through much earlier than some of the other ones. And I had a ton of questions on it and really sat with it because especially when you're thinking about, what has remained active because your nervous system or overfunctioning has continued funding it. I was like, wow. So this is where June's theme, the overall theme, non-negotiable reality, what cannot move forward as it is. So this month brings the grace period to completion. Anything built on strain, pretense, overextension, self-abandonment, or partial truth begins showing its full cost. In fact, I was on an earlier call with one of my besties, and it is definitely evident in the way in the things that I've been sharing. And I am like, wow, there has been so much overextension in my own humaning life where I've been in situations where sometimes my relationships haven't been really balanced, and it has been about me holding continuous space and not even expecting to like receive back or being asked like how I am. And it's not right, wrong, good or bad. It's the business of business. But in some ways, it has been so conditioned in my humaning to just sit in that imbalance, even though it may not feel very good. And it's really not about the other person because the other person may not even be aware that they're in this patterning of experiencing relationship like this, but it's about the awareness and then how do you clear shift and how do you create healthier relationship with self and others when you do have these realizations, or when a month is presenting this to then incorporate you being inspired, having a different way of being that may be more beneficial for you. And it doesn't mean that you can't still use your mindfulness communication and your compassionate tools, but it is important though that you have spaces where you can process and just really share. And I just want to say I just really appreciate my one of my besties that she is a safe space for me, that I can share the unfiltered Henry processing, the humaning of Henry processing, to really dig deep of like, here's the surface of like what happened. And then as we unpack the layers, it's really about like, what is possibly being unheard or unseen or some sort of hurt and what's being coming up to clear and then shift for realization. And I just want to say, I'm at one point she may be listening to this. So I just want to say, thank you, bestie. And I really appreciate you. And I'm just so grateful that you are, in my life and part of my support team. And I also want to say to everybody else who's listening, you know, you may, with friendships and relationships, you can have friends that have been in your life for so many years and it's been incredible, but then something has completed. And then you're like, wait, where's my friend support group? And then all of a sudden, you wake up one day and you then go meet somebody and they end up becoming your bestie in this next phase of your life, which is this is what happened in the friend that I'm talking about, where, I had completed a phase in working in television. That career was complete. And one of my really good friends, our relationship was complete. I have a lot of love for this person, but we were in different directions. And there was definitely, I had some sadness. And then I went and got called to do this session for this family. And I ended up meeting this person. And, it took a while for us to become, friends. And now this person is one of my cherished besties. And I just really, I'm just so grateful. And so that's where in like even non-negotiable reality, what cannot move forward as it is, in that past experience of me, completing in television and then recognizing that some of my friendships were complete, it was difficult, but also many things can be true at once. If I didn't allow the completion, I wouldn't be in some ways where I am now. And also some of the relationships I have now, which are just better suited to where I am because I can just talk about all these things in a whole nother way. And it's in alignment. And so anyway, I just want to share that because I wanted to give gratitude to this person and also speak that it's very relevant in this overall theme. And I do know that it can be really difficult, that if you go through many phases in life where You can have different friend groups. Some people, maybe they have had the same friends their entire life. Some people may not. There's just different experiences that many can have. And it's not right, wrong, good or bad. It's the business of business. And it's just really, taking up, looking at the realization of what's happening and letting yourself use the tools to process, emotionally, mentally, somatically, if anything needs to be cleared out from the body to then shift, and then setting your intentions of like, where are you now, connecting to your guides, what's being called in now for you to support you. So this month, then coming back to this month, so this month brings the grace period to completion. Anything built on strain, pretense, overextension, self abandonment, or partial truth begins showing its full cost. And that does not mean everything ends. And that is really important. June is not here to say, cut everything off, burn it down, walk away from everything that feels uncomfortable. No. And even the example I shared with you, that also didn't happen many years ago. And so June is not here to say, cut everything off. No. June is more precise than that. Some things may need repair. Some things need redesign. Some things need clearer terms. Some things need a cleaner agreement. Some things need to be completed. And some things just need to stop receiving your energy simply because they are familiar. June does not ask for drama. It asks for clear recognition. It asks what can continue, what needs to be repaired, what needs to be released, what needs to be redesigned, what can continue coherently, and what cannot move forward as it is. So take some time with those questions and reflection, and also note, let yourself journal and see if there's any feelings that are coming up, if there's any emotions that are coming up, if there's any thoughts that are coming up, or if there's any kind of pangs in the body, if there's any kind of like, "Ugh," like I felt that in my stomach, or ooh, in my arm. And you can ask questions like, is this from present life? Is this even from past lives? Or has this been handed down from the ancestors? Is something being called to process and clear and shift? Because that question, what cannot move forward as it is? It's a small question in terms of the number of words in it, but it is a big question in a lot of ways. And so, also, just a note for listeners, if you're listening to the public version on the podcast or YouTube, you may hear references as we move along to the crystalline dowsing and Reiki energy session that follows this energy forecast. So, y'all, that is a full multidimensional recalibration. It's a clearing and a recalibration that is available exclusively for the Inspiring You All Access Patreon members. And if you feel called into that deeper work, the link will be in the show notes. All right. But before we get even into the energy forecast further, I just want to take a moment to just take a breath, because already, we've shared things may be coming up. So let's just take a nice breath right now. Inhale. Allow the body to arrive in this moment. Exhale. Soften the need to force clarity before the body is ready to recognize it. Take another breath. Exhale. Take another inhale. Allow your field to receive the light truth that clarity does not have to be dramatic. Inhale on that. Exhale. Release your reflex to keep carrying what has already shown its cost. Okay, another breath. Inhale. I allow light truth to become practical. You can even say that. Inhale. I allow light truth to become practical. Exhale. I no longer need to find ambiguity through my nervous system. Yeah, that's a big one. So let's do that again. Inhale. I allow light truth to become practical. And then exhale. I no longer need to fund ambiguity through my nervous system. And then take another inhale, exhale. Whew. All right. So let's dig into the June's overall theme even more. Non-negotiable reality, what cannot move forward as it is. In some ways, too, you might even feel relieved that something is really coming to completion. And that's okay, too, friends. Okay, so June no longer speaks only in the language of visible reorganization. It speaks in the language of structural light truth becoming practical. Where May revealed reality beginning to take shape around the stabilized signal, and again, that soul signal, June is the month where the field begins showing what cannot continue inside that reality and what cannot move forward in its current form. So, y'all, this is not collapse. This isn't punishment. This is not failure of what came before. June is the clear recognition point where the human system begins feeling what has become too costly to keep carrying. And your field, the internal field, your individual field, the outer field, the external field, begins revealing where structures require repair, release, cleaner terms, or redesign. So coherence stops feeding what depends on strain, ambiguity, overextension, or self abandonment. The body becomes more direct in naming what drains life force energy. Time, money, energy, attention, nervous system capacity become clearer measurements. Rules built on self abandonment become harder to sustain. Support systems built on guilt, guesswork, or invisible labor begin revealing their limits. Postponed decisions begin asking for embodied response. And what was complete begins separating from what is still viable. So June speaks the language of non negotiable reality through structural clarity. March made the structure legible. April began the first stage of response. May began the first visible stage of reorganization. And June reveals what within that reorganization can actually hold coherence. So June is direct, June is clarifying. June is the structural light truth layer of the arc, where the world begins showing which forms can continue, which forms require repair, and which forms have already completed their usefulness. And so within this, the nervous system no longer waits inside ambiguity as though more time will make the truth easier to feel. And that's like the light truth, right? So the field begins learning that clarity is not disruption. Clarity is protection for what is true. Neutrality shifts from allowing visible reorganization into responding to what has become obvious without gripping, bracing, over explaining, or delay. So, where May revealed how response began altering time, support, relationship, communication, placement, endings, openings, and material life structure, June reveals which of these movements are coherent enough to continue and which ones have only remained active because your energy is still funding them. Take a moment to process that. Which ones have remained active because your energy is still funding them? So, this month brings the grace period to completion. And also, just to let you know, if you're new here, welcome. And there will be many moments where things may be repeated in a different way because in the processing and our humaning, oftentimes we have to hear things multiple ways and you may hear something slightly different. And then it's like, oh, wait, something may have cleared and the consciousness has been like downloaded and there may be a shift. And so I just wanted to share that. Okay, so this month brings the grace period to completion. Anything built on strain, pretense, overextension, or partial truth begins to reveal its true cost. Again, this does not mean everything must end. It means everything must become more truthful in its structure. And that we're really talking about light truth being able to become in more visible form. And so some structures will complete, some will require repair, some will need clearer terms, some will reveal that they've been sustained by the nervous system rather than by true alignment. Yeah, so that is something really interesting to begin processing and understanding too, that your nervous system may be sustaining something and it's actually not true alignment. And so with this though, June does not ask for drama. It asks for clear recognition. So expect clear lines around what can continue, what needs to end, what must be repaired, what requires a more coherent structure before it can move forward. So this may look like projects that need constant rescuing beginning to lose momentum. Roles that require self abandonment feeling heavier than before. Support systems built on guilt, guesswork, or emotional overextension, or even like mental overextension, mental fatigue, revealing their limits. You mean you may have been in conversations where you're holding space for people, and there's an unwillingness maybe in another person to actually use tools, and maybe they're mentally looping in the same story, and you are then looping with them in the same story, and you're starting to feel mentally, emotionally fatigued and overextended, and physically you feel drained and exhausted afterwards as well, and that could be revealing limits. And again, it's not right, wrong, good or bad. You still can have mindfulness communication, you can still be in compassion, but if you have felt that you keep getting in the same looping situation, and there's just an unwillingness where there's not, like, you can't talk about what's really going on, and that you're just on the surface of it, that's just something to look at. Because within that, then the body could be flagging hidden drains through fatigue, headaches, tension, digestive disruption, or nervous system overload. And it might be then maybe there's a clearing being called as well. Decisions postponed for too long beginning to show up through deadlines, expenses, delays, conversations, or necessary exits. The nervous system begins to recognize that the continued maybe ambiguity requires a real energetic cost. Have you ever been in an ambiguous situation where there's just doesn't seem to be grounding, or you keep trying to get like, okay, so what do we want to do? And it's just like there's just an ambiguous like nature to it. And your nervous system is then carrying a real energetic cost to this. So the neutrality shifts from waiting it out into responding to what is already clear with steadiness, simplicity, and embodied light truth. And that's where neutrality, where you're basically becoming grounded, aligned, or becoming a clear channel, allowing the light to flow through. You shift into this beneficial aspect of neutrality, where in neutrality, that deep sense of consciousness comes in, and you're then able to really respond in a clear steadiness, simplicity, embodied light truth. Um, and then you're not forcing an ending. You're not trying to make reality comply. You're not trying to push the field into a premature decision. Reality is beginning to show what can hold. Reality is beginning to show what can hold the signal now, and that's your soul signal. And so this is then a clarifying bridge between visible reorganization and the structural light truth required for coherent continuation. And this is where June becomes important, because the month is not about asking because the month is not about asking, what do I want to create? It begins by asking, what can continue without distortion? What requires repair? What needs clearer terms? What has completed? What has only remained active because my nervous system was still carrying it? That is the June field. And so I also just want to say too, it was interesting, as I was working on the energy forecast and putting it together for the Inspiring You Patreon. I put that out yesterday, and it was interesting because as I was doing it, it was, I don't know, some days ago. All of a sudden I was outside in my outdoor area, and I could feel the energy of my place, the land. And I realized, oh, I've not done a Reiki and dowsing session for the land, the building, the place. And yeah, I always, when I do this, I also ask if there's any neighbors who want to receive it for the highest good, respecting, the free will of the human, asking their souls if they wish to receive it, let them receive it for the highest good. And many of you know that my mom passed on April 19th, 2026. And so April and May, and even the months before, there's just been a lot of things that my family have been working through. And so I usually do Reiki and dowsing sessions for, my place and also the land and the area, my neighbors, the community, asking again, respecting free will. Um, I do it fairly regularly. And because I am somebody who's highly sensitive and as an empath, I do feel like, so I was sitting there doing the energy forecast and I was like, oh, I just felt like the energy and I was like, I just felt stagnant. It could feel like there's some like, I don't know, like some a little bit of just, it just felt like, ew. Like there was just some stagnant negative energy. It wasn't so much, but it definitely was there. There's a little bit of friction. There was a little bit of like staleness. There was a little bit like um apathy. There was a lot of different elements to it. And I could tell, I was like, oh man, the land needs a clearing. The places need a clearing, and then, possibly some neighbors who wish to receive for the highest good, if they wish to receive it. And so I've been doing the energy forecast, and then I was like, okay, I need to actually, this is so much more important because I hadn't cleared the buildings or the land in probably like 2 months. Before I left to go back to Massachusetts, I did do a full like Reiki and saged my place, and but I didn't like do the full. And so I took about 2 hours to do this entire dowsing. And it was so interesting because um I immediately felt like the shift and I was like, okay, it feels better. I can breathe now easier. And I could tell like, okay, that whatever that like stagnant friction energy, like it was gone. And there was just a sense of peace and coherence, calmness. And so then the next day, a couple of my neighbors who I share and talk about this with, I said, oh, hey, I just want to let you know I did do a full dowsing. And I did ask, permission if your soul wanted to receive it. And two of my neighbors were like, wait, they told me around in the afternoon time, they were called to like each they live in different spaces. They called to take naps and they both woke up feeling really refreshed. And they said before they had felt so tired and they didn't know why they were so tired. And yet they felt really refreshed, recalibrated. And even to like the next day, they're like, yeah, I feel really refreshed. And so my point of sharing this is you know, it's like I was called to do this because in June is asking what can continue without distortion, what requires repair, what needs clearer terms, what is completed. And in the space of the energy that I'm working on, this energy forecast, there was, I could feel there was distortion energy in the space, in the community. And so even if I had just done a dousing clearing in terms of my own self, in my own individual field, it doesn't mean the collective field. It doesn't mean the external field is without distortion. And so how could I then, essentially put out this energy forecast when I'm talking about this? So I had to take 2 hours to then focus on a community element, focus on what is going on in the external field that my individual field is currently in, because we are within something. We are physical bodies within the earth body. But then even more so, we are in community experiences. You can't bubble wrap yourself up so much that you're just not also feeling the presence of what is going on in the external field. So again, this month is not asking, what do I want to create? It begins asking, what can continue without distortion? What requires repair? What needs clearer terms? What is completed? What has only remained active because my nervous system was still carrying it? And so that's the June field. And so without even me really realizing how much I was already in the presence of the energy of June, I was called and I followed that intuition and did that essentially in my own community, the dowsing for the community, again, respecting free will, and then hearing about it from the next day from two of my neighbors of how they felt so tired, kind of sluggish, and just felt kind of drained before. And then they were called to take a nap, which often cases during Reiki and dowsing sessions, some of my clients will be called to, take they fall asleep, and then all of a sudden halfway through a session, or maybe even at the end of the session, right as I'm ending, they'll wake up going, "Oh my God, I'm like so rejuvenated, recalibrated. I feel like so light and grounded. And wow, I feel so awake." That happens quite often. And so hearing from my neighbors, I then realized I was like, "Oh my God, I was definitely following already the energy of June." And then once I had done that clearing in the space, I was like, it was so easy then. I mean, it's not, it was just easier than to sit down and allow myself to focus on putting together the June forecast. Because before, I had elements of it, but I was kind of like antsy because I kept noticing the external field, and I couldn't just sit and ignore that kind of feeling. So that is the June field. And I just wanted to share that because, you know, uh, it does matter. I mean, it really does matter in terms of like, I feel even more so recognizing, do I need a clearing? Am I grounded? Do I need a recalibration? Do I need to process mental, emotional, physical? What tools are being called for? What is really needed in this experience? Is there something in the external field? And it's not always going to be perfect. It's we're in a humaning experience. We're here to learn, grow, and evolve. So make sure to give yourself, also just space. We're just here to learn. And sometimes we stumble, and then we just use the tools to get ourselves back up and reground. And so give yourself grace with that. Okay, so I also just want to say, I just want to define one of the definitions that we've been talking about, the definition of structural light truth. So hold on one sec. Okay. Structural light truth, y'all. Hold on one sec. I'm trying to fix something on the screen. Okay. Structural light truth is the stabilized soul level light truth that has become clear enough, embodied enough, and structurally strong enough to shape real choices, boundaries, repair, release, redesign, and coherent continuation within the human system. So, Oversoul Sahariel shares light truth is the truth of the soul. Structural light truth is the truth of the soul once it has become strong enough to work with the human system to support organizing life. So, it is the truth that can no longer remain only internal. It begins shaping the structure in working with the options of what the human system can choose, what the body can no longer have to carry, what the body longer has to carry, what relationships can continue, what work is being called to change, what agreements require repair, what is completed. So, structural light truth is not harsh, it's clear. It does not force or reveals what can hold. And so that's the end of the message from Oversoul Sahariel. So again, Oversoul Sahariel is often like Oversoul Sahariel always talks about precise language. And so you hear that in the preciseness of like the messages from Oversoul Sahariel. So speaking of definitions, y'all, for those of you who don't know, I somehow managed in everything that's been going on in my life in the last couple of months, I somehow managed to complete a dictionary that I've been working on. Yes, y'all, I put together a dictionary. And if you've been with me for a while, it probably has not surprised you because I really like words. I like to ask the guides for definitions. But I just want to say it is published, it is on Amazon, and it was not easy. With the passing of my mom on April 19th, 2026, finishing this book became one of the hardest things I have had to do in my life. And at the same time, I felt deeply called to complete it and publish it. Both things or true and can be true. It was hard. It was emotional. It required focus, support, discipline, and a lot of inner steadiness. And there was also a ton of joy, peace, love, gratitude, realizations, inspiration. I mean, I just loved sitting with the material, talking to the guides about it, asking questions, and there was just so much wonder in bringing it through. Many things can be true at once. We are multidimensional. And I also want to say, I thought the book had been mostly completed before my mom passed. I had read the entire book on the plane going home to Massachusetts to see her before she passed. But after she passed, while on the plane back to California after the funeral, I went through the entire book to see if it needed any other clarifications. And I realized that there were more sections being called to be put in. Yeah, I definitely had a very human moment on the plane. Oh no, I'm not sure I can do this at this time. My mom just passed. I'm mourning. There's a ton of business to death when a loved one passes. It was like a full on yikes moment for my human. It felt like a lot, like a lot. I actually closed my computer. I watched a movie before I was even be able, like while I was on the plane, before I could go back in. But I had 6 hours on the plane, and it can give you an opportunity of many things. But so I was able to go back to it on the plane, Reiki, resettle. And the thing is, my mom's passing brought in new realizations. And I'm sharing this because it goes along with the energy forecast of June. My mom's passing brought in new realizations and understanding to my human that I could not ignore. I could feel my guides, along with my mom's presence with my dad, who passed in June 2020, of the importance of it. But my human was certainly on the struggle bus for a moment. And I thought of just publishing it as is without the new sections. I realized I needed it on the plane. And I thought, I could just publish it as is. No one will really know but me and my guides. And I could then just do a second part of it eventually. But in the end, I felt so called to include the new sections in the first book. And I just want to say, as much as you want to ignore true callings in the humaning, or at least for me in my humaning, can be really hard to actually ignore. So I did some Reiki dousing with some box breathing, a ton of box breathing. And when I felt settled, I dug in on the plane and when I got home. And it was a ton of work. It took me in the last week alone working on it for over 60 hours. One day I worked on it for 16 hours. I was up till 2 a.m. I had no I had and also I was doing it through Kindle publishing. And so I had no idea if I was actually going to actually make the deadline set on Kindle publishing. And Kindle publishing said I could no longer delay it any longer because it was in pre-sale mode. And with my mom passing and my mom going into hospice before, I had already delayed it twice. And this was a new experience for me. I'd never done Kindle publishing. And so my human was learning along the way. And so when I went to see if I could delay it for another time, Kindle was like, "You can't delay it another time. If you do delay it a third time, then you'll have to wait an entire year to actually publish it." So that was another yikes moment for my human. And, it just felt so important to really try to finish it for the deadline. And I could feel my guides. I could feel Oviso Sahariel, Aurelia, my soul aligned higher self Aurelia, my collective guidance lake team. I could just really feel them being like, "It's time now. It's time now. The window is now." And so I felt the importance to finish it for the deadline, especially also because what I witnessed and held space for as my mom passed, which I did do a podcast episode on. So I used every tool available to me, asking support from my soul, oversoul guides, and I just kept bringing my human system back into focus again and again so this could actually be completed. And I'm sharing this because I am tired of only hearing stories of times of sometimes people will be like, "Poof, I downloaded something in a meditation and it came to me and here's a light transmission and here it is." And yes, that can be true, and I'm not denying people those experiences of it. And also it can be true that you received a message or a light transmission or a download from your guides, and there is beneficial effort in place for the human when it feels and it can still feel really hard and joyful at the same time. And I had so much joy when I hit publishing. When I published it, I had so much tremendous joy, but I was still tired, but I was happy that I managed to do it. And when I did publish it, I danced around the room. I celebrated. I mean, I felt so much joy. I felt joy along the way, even with all the other things I felt. And I just also want to say, out of all the books that I imagined I might be called to bring through, a dictionary was not really one of them. And yet, when I look back, it all makes sense. I've always been somebody who's been interested, curious about language, words, communication. How does it all work? I have journal entries for like years asking the guys questions. And I looked up words all the time. I used to carry, in fact, look, y'all, look at what's right near me. Y'all, I have my dictionary from, this is my dictionary from like school, from high school, college. This is my dictionary. It is still by my side. Like, hello, right by where I work. I have a dictionary. And even though I look it up, I look up things on my phone or I ask the guides, like the story dots all connect. And so I used to carry that dictionary before we had access to everything on our phones. That dictionary I carry again throughout my years. It remains here as I do my dowsing, as I do my work. I've always been curious about words, language, interested in understanding the meaning, frequency, structure of language, how it all really works here, how it works. I studied communication in college. I was happy to study and learn in all my communication classes. And so many ways, this light truth was always there. And I always wondered, why aren't we updating more of the definitions as we've evolved and more consciousness has come in? And it just took my human system a little time to recognize all of this. I mean, my guides may have known and been like hinting. I mean, my dictionary has been by my side. And so this is also part of the wonder of the unfolding and connecting the light truth story dots. And I promise you this is going to fold back into June. I will say the ebook is not perfect. This was my first time using Kindle Direct Publishing, and there are some formatting pieces I already know I want to adjust. And if you've downloaded the book, there'll be another version in a month or so with book formatting updates. And of course, the update will be for free. The content won't change, just how the book looks, but you can already buy it, and it is completely readable. And if you did already buy it, you can just re-download the book when I fix certain things. I'll just let you know. And again, it will be free. And when I asked the guides if I just wait for that year for so many reasons, the guides were just really clear. This is what they brought through. Do not wait for perfection. Finish what you are called to, then release it. That was the end of the message. So I did. And so I just want to take this minute because, y'all, it was not easy. It was not easy coming back after my mom passed, moving through the waves of grief and being like, okay, there's these really important parts that need to be put in. Let me make myself a clear channel. And yet I had so much support from my guides, and my mom and dad were really present with me as I was bringing it through. My mom is now gone into recalibration, but they were like literally just sitting with me. I could just feel their presence so strongly of how important it was. And even though I was going through all these multiple things, I still just kept using the tools and working with the guides, and I did it. And I just feel so proud that somehow I managed to do this in sort of some of the shit show that I was in processing. And humaning can be so many things, and it can be hard, but it also can be so extraordinary. And I just want you to also, whatever's going on in your life, just know if you're going through something hard, there can still be something extraordinary through it. And you are so supported in ways that you may already know, or maybe you're like, wait, I can take some time to see who are my guides? What is my connection to my soul? What are connections to my ancestors? And feel that support and care and love. And because I know it can be hard sometimes as we're moving through this, where we feel, alone, or we feel scared, or we feel we're processing so much. So I wanted to share that, and then how this goes into the June energy forecast connection. So again, like, the June forecast is about non-negotiable reality, what cannot move forward as it is. And so in me doing the book, I was already like completing the book. I was already experiencing the energy of June. The book could not move forward as an almost finished project anymore. I couldn't delay it anymore. It wasn't about doing it in a year. The book could not move forward as an almost finished project anymore. It was complete in what it needed to be once I put those sections in, and it was being called to be put out now. And my human system could not keep waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect energy, perfect formatting, perfect emotional, mental, or physical state. It couldn't wait for that. And also, I couldn't ignore the new sections that were clearly asking to be included. So it became very June. What needed repaired had to be repaired. And so that means then adding these two new sections into it. What needed redesign had to be redesigned. And so in adding two new sections, I actually had to move many of the definitions around in terms of the sections. What needed completion had to be completed. And this was the book in its current format. And what was true had to become real. It wasn't just about keep talking about the book or keeping it on pre-sale or delaying it for a year. It was about what was true had to become real. And that is very June. Non-negotiable reality, what cannot move forward as it is. And it was not easy. It was not perfect, but it was complete enough to release. And sometimes that is the teaching, not waiting until everything feels flawless, not abandoning the work because it feels hard, too much. You're grieving, you have to try to figure out all these other things that you need to do that you've never done before. Not pretending the human system is not part of the process, but listening deeply enough to know this is ready and this matters. Finish what you're called to and then release it. And that's really what happened for me was it's ready and it really matters. I and it didn't mean that I didn't give my humans some time to like process and, just watch some light TV shows or some Hallmark movies, which I do, or go take a walk or meditate. I gave my human plenty of time to like rest in between moments, but there was a beneficial activation of just this light energy coming through that, I mean, I worked one day, like it was like 14, 16-hour days. And I just was like, I could feel the relevance of the importance of it, how much it mattered. And it's not even so much about how the world is going to receive it. It's just the creation energy flowing through, and that this is the timing. And so it was very June, and that was in like May. And so you can be feeling the energies of months before they even come in fully because they're showing up. And so with that, I'm sure more will be revealed as June unfolds. And as I wind up that story about the June energy already, if you are interested in purchasing, I am going to leave a link in the show notes. And I just want to say too, because we started with the definition of structural light truth. That definition is not actually in the book, but it is in it is already in the post that's pinned on the Inspiring You Patreon. And again, that definition is because we'll be talking about structural light truth even more. So, uh, the structural light truth is the stabilized soul level light truth that has become clear enough, embodied enough, and structurally strong enough to shape real choices, boundaries, repair, release, redesign, and coherent continuation within the human system. So, in a lot of ways, also me doing the book, I was in an element of structural light truth where it was stabilized soul level light truth that has become clear enough and embodied enough to support shaping real choices, boundaries, and working with the coherence within the human system. And that comes back to, doing the practices, doing the dowsings, doing the meditate with me's, that all of it has helped me in terms of stabilizing, my own like soul signal even more so. It hasn't been for me, maybe for others, it has been a cakewalk, which awesome for you. Like I'm happy if that has been for my human, it has not been a cakewalk at times, even though I've had all these questions and I've worked with my guides. It has not always been easy for me. It has been really difficult for me at times. And with it, I've just stuck to using the tools, asking the guides for support, meditation, journaling, coming back to the tools again and again, realigning, regrounding, clearing, letting myself shift when it's, beneficial and ready, and recalibrating and understanding the tools even more so with energy work. Learning Reiki and dowsing has significantly transformed my human experience in ways that I knew I was called to this to understand energy in a whole nother way. And it has been so, helpful for me. But whatever tools you are called to, let yourself keep using them and just keep building those muscles. All right. So with that, then I've given you now two different examples of already the June energy in my own life, the overall June energy. Well, now let's move into the 5 themes. So the guys brought through 5 themes for June. Usually there are 9, but the guys brought through 5 themes for June instead of 9. And if you've been here for a while, you just know that the guides usually bring that through an overall theme and then multiple themes underneath it. Usually it's been 9, now it's 5. And that the guides talked about, because I asked them like, only 5? Why 5? What's going on here? And the guides are like, it's current progression. They said that June does not need more categories. It needs clarity, it needs focus. It doesn't need more additional categories. So with that, each theme does sit under the overall theme, which the overall theme is non-negotiable reality, what cannot move forward as it is. So theme 1 is under the overall theme. Structural end dates, what is completed stops quietly extending itself. And so this first theme also has a harmonic function arc, which is closure activation. So the individual field feels the drag of tasks, roles, agreements, and identities that has moved past their natural lifespan. And then with that, then the external field can then support you in terms of revealing where temporary fixes, delays, and workarounds can no longer hold the structure together, making clean completion, honest repair, or clear exit harder to avoid. And I also just want to share in the book that I just put out, it does talk about the individual field, the external field, and the guides have been really encouraging me to share more and more about the individual field and the external field, just so we have more understanding of how this operation is here working. All right, so this is the dynamic. The individual field feels the drag. The external field shows, and that's the outer field. The external field shows why the drag can no longer be ignored. The external field does not remove the pattern from the individual field. You have free will. It is your field within the field of the external. It reveals, though, where the pattern no longer has enough structural support in the external field to continue. That doesn't mean, though, there may still be workarounds. So the workaround may still exist internally, but the outer structure begins showing where it no longer works. That is how June reveals completion. This theme may show up as sudden awareness that something you've been maintaining no longer has the same energetic life inside it. A project, role, agreement, identity, or relational pattern may still exist externally, but internally, the structure may already feel complete. You may still be technically doing the thing. You may still have the role. You may still be in agreement. You may still be in the pattern, but your body, energy, focus, and field may no longer feel available to keep animating it in the same way. And y'all, that can be uncomfortable for the human because sometimes then with that, the external structure may not have caught up with the internal knowing, yet you're starting to get signs of that from the external field. I know many things can be true at once. So you still may be in an experience. Like for me, when I worked in television, I had the internal knowing for a couple years that I was being called to be complete with TV, but it took a couple years for it to actually be complete. And then the external field, though, started showing me signs as the 2 year end mark started coming up. And I knew that I was really like, wow, this is really the ending. So something may already feel complete inside you before it has ended outside of you. And that gives you time to process mentally, emotionally, physically, and also it gives you time to start thinking about your future and what you want to call in and doing some in TV we would call it pre-production work, pre-production for your next production. So or goal setting, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't mean that the goal setting is going to happen right away, like in terms of the goals. It just means you're calling something in maybe for a year, 2, 3 years from now. It gives you time to actually sit down and journal and write. What do you want in terms of your next chapter? So something may already feel expired in your body before the conversation has happened. Something may already feel finished in your field before the practical steps have been taken. This does not always mean an immediate ending. Like I said, when I worked in television, I understood like a couple years before the completion. And I started telling people 2 years before. So I'm not going to be working in television for the rest of my life. I'm going to be done in the near future. And And so something may already feel finished in your field before the practical steps have been taken. This does not always mean an immediate ending. Sometimes it means repair. Sometimes it means a cleaner agreement. Sometimes it means authentic, honest closure. Sometimes it means letting a role become smaller. Sometimes it means removing your energy from an old pattern. That was an interesting when the guys brought that through. Removing your energy from an old pattern. The key is that the structure can no longer keep receiving energy simply because it is familiar. The individual field first feels this as a drag, fatigue, resistance, or the quiet knowing that something has already completed. Then the external field begins showing where the structure no longer holds through delays, lack of return, practical friction, stalled momentum, unclear agreements, or the breakdown of temporary fixes. So for me, when I worked in television, I did have an agent for some time, and I know my agent would send me on interviews, and it was often the case that I actually really loved interview for jobs. And if you worked in television, often the case, you'd work on a show for 3 months and then go for multiple interviews. So over my 20, 5 or 20 plus years, however many years I worked in television, I went on a lot of job interviews and I looked at it as the art of interviewing, and I loved going in for interviews because I love talking about working in television. I was a passion. I love talking about TV shows, movies, and so I always loved going on interviews. And a lot of the times I would get a job offer. And towards the end of my career in television, my agent was sending me out for jobs and I was not. getting job offers in TV, yet I would go out for a job in TV, and I'd already started doing I'd already been on the energy practitioner, path, but I really started actually doing it, and I would go on a job interview, and I would not get the job interview in TV, but next thing you know, I would get a random call for somebody wanting an energy session. And so the external field begins showing you where the structure no longer holds. So delay, lack of return. There was lack of return in television at that time towards the end. But there was openings in terms of my energy practitioner work. It didn't mean that I didn't have sadness or like fear of like, oh my God, what does this mean? My 20 plus year career that I've built and worked on. I've climbed the mountain. I've summited. What do you mean? Now I'm starting at the end of like didn't mean I didn't have to workshop through that. But I did had to recognize it, what the external field was saying. And when my agent said this to me, I totally understood what he meant. And I was like, yes, yes, isn't that interesting? But I couldn't tell him, well, yeah, but I just got these 2 new, you know, Reiki and dowsing clients because I wasn't fully there yet, but I could see the signs of what the external field was showing. And I had already felt in my individual field for 2 years. I had that quiet knowing that something was complete. And then it took 2 years, then the external field began showing where the structure could no longer hold, and there was lack of return. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to have to process sadness, loss, and grief, and also be excited about the new chapter. You can be excited and enjoy about the next step in your life, and also be like, oh my goodness, what is going to happen? Especially, at the time I was in my 40s. I was like, I've built this whole career. What do you mean? I'm basically starting like all over? Like, what does that mean for my future? It was really scary and also exciting because I could see the signs. So that's where I had to lean into the tools, ask my guides for support. And I also did a ton of meditation. I did a ton of chanting meditations to help reset the nervous system. And I was also doing somatic experiencing at that time to support my human and a lot of other things as well. And also, obviously, Reiki and dowsing energy work too. Okay, so for this theme one, though, here's the reality check. Here's the reality check. Projects that continue without true return, support, or coherence begin losing momentum. And I gave you an example from my own life. Relationships running on obligation, avoidance, or old terms may pause until authenticity, honesty enters the field. Old self images, such as caretaker, overachiever, rescuer, or perpetual student, begin to feel heavy rather than meaningful. What once felt responsible may now feel like energetic overextension. And the field begins showing where completion has already occurred internally, even if the outer structure has not yet caught up. So here's the takeaway. If your field requires constant persuasion to remain engaged, something has already completed, expired, or needs to be restructured. So, for the first theme, the invitation is not to force endings. It is to be honest about what has already lost life force. Ask yourself, where am I still trying to convince myself? Where am I carrying a role that no longer carries me? Where am I calling loyalty what may actually be overextension? Y'all, that was definitely me in television at the end. Where am I waiting for external ending before I let myself admit internal completion? This is not failure. This is structural completion, and structural completion is part of coherent continuation. Something cannot continue truthfully if it only is being held together by your exhaustion. Yes. And I also like to say, so I had that career in television and I was called at a time to career transition, and it was a really hard experience, even though I love doing energy practitioner work and there was so much joy and excitement and wonder. And I had a lot of sadness about leaving television. But then when I eventually made the clear choice and completed one and really, went into the other, I had my business was set up and I had been doing this for years and my whole way of working changed and I had clients, and then next you know we went into the pandemic, and I had already been I had already been in a way of life that suited the pandemic. And what's interesting and also was challenging and sad, I had a lot of compassion for many of my friends who were working in television and films, the entertainment industry. It completely shut down in the pandemic. And then fast forward, there was a strike, and there's been a lot of challenges and changes in the entertainment industry, especially in Los Angeles, where many of my friends have ended up being out of work for many, many years. And it has been really hard, and I have so much compassion for them, and I try to support in the way I can. But again, like, I was being guided at a time because the guides could see in some ways, like, the future, obviously, what's gonna happen in terms of pandemic, what's gonna happen in the entertainment industry, what's gonna happen in Los Angeles. And so that's where then you working in relationship with your guides and having trust, because you may think, "Oh, this is the reason why in this moment I'm being called to this." But there may even be even grander reasons that you're not privy to yet, because you're not there yet in that present moment, and you're being guided to something, and more information will show up later and reveal even more to why you're being called to something now to shift, which is going to prepare you for something in the future. And that's why it's like important to really understand your relationship with your intuition and your gut, and really your guides, and that relationship with trust, and really understand the difference and the discernment between it, and just working in those relationships to understand. And I know it can be really hard for the human, especially for the human, to know, like, what is my next step, and not having all the clear information, because sometimes the humans want all the information, but you just may not be beneficial to have it all yet. So just keep using those tools to support yourself, and especially strengthen your relationship with your soul and your oversoul and your collective guidance light team to support you. All right. Theme number 2: energy budget audit. Hidden costs become visible. So the second theme then connects with the harmonic function arc, which is resource reckoning, which I was like, reckoning, woo. Like I said, they are being much more precise in their language in this one. All right. So the individual field tracks where time, money, attention, emotional labor, or mental labor, physical labor, or mental space are being spent without true coherence. The external field converts vague drains into visible evidence: fatigue, fees, delays, lost time, emotional residue, or body tension. It's to support you. So the individual field also supports you in that, but then the external field reflects that, just to make that discernment. So this theme may show up through a sharper awareness of where your energy is actually going. And so with that then, so this theme shows up through a sharper awareness of where your energy is actually going, not where you think it's going, not where you wish it were going, where it is actually going. Time, money, emotional labor, mental labor, physical labor, attention, planning, driving, texting, explaining, managing, anticipating, recovering. This all becomes part of this audit. And so, again, this theme is energy budget audit. Hidden costs become visible. So, what once felt like a small obligation may reveal itself as a larger drain. What seemed manageable may show its true cost through fatigue, resentment, body tension, or loss of focus. June brings the hidden energetic math into plain view so your life force can be redirected with more accuracy. This is not about becoming stingy with life. It's not about fear. It's not about withdrawing from everything that asks anything of you. It is about accuracy because some things cost more than they appear to cost. A 15-minute conversation may take 2 days of emotional recovery. So process that, friends. I mean, when the guys brought that through, I was like, wowzers. A small errand may interrupt the whole nervous system. A vague agreement may use more energy than a direct conversation. A free offering may cost more money. A free offering may cost more than money could measure. A relationship dynamic may look manageable on the outside, but require constant internal monitoring. A project may look successful, but be draining the very system it's supposed to support. And this is why June audits the energy budget, not to shame you. It's to return energy to what can actually hold coherence. And if you do get the book that I put out, Coherence is the guys talk about that a lot. Okay, here's a reality check on this theme. Sleep, money, attention, and emotional energy leak where clarity is missing. So it's fine. It's fine. Items on the calendar may be creating headaches, exhaustion, resentment, or unexpected expenses. The body becomes less willing to fund unnecessary errands, unclear commitments, or invisible labor. What looks small on paper may reveal a large energetic cost in practice. The day itself begins showing where life force is being overused, scattered, or misdirected. Here's the takeaway: track where your energy truly goes. What repeatedly drains you is asking for clarity, simplification, or release. This is a month where it may help to literally write it down. Journal. Here are some questions. Where is your energy going? What takes more from you than you admit? What do you keep saying is no big deal, even though your body has a reaction every time? Where are you leaking energy through unclear agreements? Where are you spending money to avoid a decision? Where are you spending time to avoid telling the truth? Where is your attention being held by something that no longer deserves that level of access? June makes the hidden cost visible. And once something becomes visible, you can make a cleaner choice. Okay, theme 3: hard boundaries, simple language, no more negotiating basic needs. Okay, y'all. So this theme also has the harmonic function arc, which is integrity enforcement. The individual field moves from inner negotiation into clear yes, clear no, or clear terms. The external field tests clarity by revealing which agreements can hold light truth and which only rely on vagueness. This theme may show up as a reduced ability to keep softening, explaining, hinting, waiting, or over accommodating around what you already know. The body may become less available for unclear agreements, emotional guesswork, or conversations where basic needs remain unnamed. The teaching here is simplicity: a clean yes, a clean no, a clear term, a direct request. A boundary held through action rather than repeated explanation. This is not about becoming harsh. This is not about spiritualizing rigidity. This is not about using boundaries as punishment. You can communicate mindfully, remain compassionate, and still hold healthy boundaries. And this is important because many people have been conditioned to believe compassion means softening the truth until it disappears. But compassion without clarity can become overextension, and clarity without compassion can become force. And June asks for both: mindful communication, compassion, healthy boundaries, simple language, embodied follow through. Sometimes the most loving thing is not another explanation. Sometimes the most compassionate thing is not another attempt to make someone understand. Sometimes the clearest thing is, no, I'm not available for that. Yes, I can do this, but not in that time frame. I need a cleaner agreement before we continue. That work does not, that does not, or you can say this: That does not work for my capacity. I'm open to repairing this, but not repeating the same pattern. I care and I still need this boundary. June supports language that the body can stand behind because when the words are unclear, which it's interesting the guys brought that through because I'm like, I just put out a dictionary too. So when the words are unclear, the nervous system often carries the confusion. When the boundary is vague, the body carries the pressure. When the agreement is unfinished, the field carries the residue. So here's the reality check. Maybe later begins clarifying into no, yes, or yes with these terms. People, systems, or dynamics that rely on ambiguity may meet a more defined edge. Direct communication becomes more effective than hinting, rescuing, explaining, or over softening. The body may resist conversations that keep basic needs unnamed. Boundaries become less about defense and more about structural honesty. And as I'm sharing this too, I mean, part of my morning conversation with my bestie was about these things. I'm like, I'm so in the June energy. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to have a moment of like processing and then realizing like, oh, okay. Um this is where, boundaries or healthy boundaries are being called for. So remember, boundaries become less about defense and more about structural honesty. And here's the takeaway: say what is true with simple language. You can still be mindful and compassionate, but really start working with true, simple language and then let your actions support the clarity. So, this month, notice where you're over explaining. Notice where you're trying to make a boundary sound gentle, that it no longer functions. Notice where you're waiting for someone else to intuit what you have not said directly. Notice where your body already knows the boundary, but your words have not caught up yet. June does not ask you to be cruel. It asks you to be clear. And then theme 4 is work that works. Output must match integrity. So this fourth theme then connects to the harmonic function arc of purpose, process, alignment. So the individual field may notice body tension, fatigue, resistance when skill, values, timing, and task structure are out of alignment. The external field may reveal where hustle, overfunctioning, or outdated methods are no longer producing sustainable results while offering clearer feedback around which systems, structures, processes can better support the individual field. We are really a field within a field, my friends. And so this theme may show up around work, service, creativity, business, money, leadership, caregiving, or any place where your output has been separated from your actual capacity or values. June reveals where something may be productive but not coherent. It may still generate results, it may still look successful, it may still use your gifts, it may still matter, but if the process depends on overextension, invisible labor, urgency, and that's non beneficial urgency, nervous system strain, or self abandonment, it will begin to feel unstable. The adjustment is not to stop creating. The shift is to let the structure of the work become as aligned as the purpose behind it. And that is the important distinction. The purpose may still be true, the gift may still be strong, the work may still be meaningful, the service may still be aligned, but the way the work is being carried may need to change. Or you might be complete in experience. Like when I worked in television, I was complete in experience. It didn't mean that I wasn't showing up and doing the job, but I was definitely exhausted and depleted, and it just felt different than my previous years. And so that's where you have to look and realize that, okay, I'm not in Groundhog's Day and I feel different than I did the year prior, and check in. So, okay, so this is where June becomes practical and it asks, can the work hold integrity not only in its message but in its process? Can the schedule support the body? Can the money structure support the output? And with me at the time when I worked in television, I then started realizing, like, wait a minute, I'm working like 7 days a week and I'm on a flat rate and I'm not getting any overtime. What am I doing here? Like, it was a huge realization. Whereas the previous years, I just didn't, I was so like into the work and exciting. And I then realized my level of output wasn't matching what I was receiving back. And I was even feeling even more deflated, drained, and exhausted. So that's one of the questions. Can the money structure support the output? And let yourself really answer that honestly. Can the system support the gift? And I realized at the time also in TV that part of the system was broken and it was no longer really supporting. And I wasn't able to see that really before because I was in a different experience of it. And so, let yourself really ponder these questions, not from a surface level, but from real in the heart and really letting yourself see the grit of it. Another question you can ask is, can the pacing support the nervous system? Can the role be held without resentment? That's another big one. Can the role be held without resentment? Can the offering be sustained without depletion? Can the work continue without depending on emergency energy? Yeah. So to take some time to journal these questions, you can pause and like write them down. If you're in the Inspiring You All Access Patreon, I will have the entire transcript at some point put up. But you can take some time and pause this and write these down. So this theme is especially important also for just healers, teachers, creators, caregivers, leaders, and entrepreneurs, and anyone whose gifts have been carried through over responsibility. And that could also be, parents, moms and dads. And that could be through, coaches and just anyone. Because sometimes the work is true, but the structure is outdated. Sometimes the purpose is aligned, but the pace is not. Sometimes the offering is needed, but the way it is delivered is draining the person delivering it. Sometimes the skill is strong, but the system around the skill is weak. And sometimes you are complete in an experience and your skills are being called in another place now. So June reveals that, not to stop the work, to strengthen the structure that holds it. So the reality check is tasks that use your strongest gifts while ignoring your values may begin to feel energetically costly. Teams, clients, projects, or systems that refuse to update may lose coherence, momentum, or key support. Revenue models built on nonstop output, invisible labor, or nervous system pressure may need redesign, or maybe you're complete with that experience. Work that once felt purposeful may require new structure, cleaner pacing, or clearer boundaries, or maybe you're complete and you're being called to something else. The field begins separating aligned contribution from overextended productivity. So, the takeaway: let your work structure reflect your integrity, craft, cash flow, capacity, and conscience. Let them begin moving together. So this month, look at your work, look at your offerings, look at your schedule, and look at how your energy moves through what you create. You can ask, here's some reflection questions. Where is the purpose true, but the structure outdated? Where am I confusing devotion with overextension? Where is my body telling me the work needs a new rhythm? Where does my pricing, pacing, communication, or delivery need to reflect the actual cost of the work? Where have I outgrown a method, even if the mission is still true? June asked the work to become more coherent, not only meaningful, coherent. And that brings us to our final theme, which is theme 5: physical proof the body keeps the only score that matters. I kind of love when they brought this through because years ago I did read The Body Keeps Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and I was like so interested in what he has brought through and realized that I went and took his, I think it was his 7 month Body Keeps a Score. It's a practitioner trauma informed course, and I learned so much in that course. And so this theme, physical proof, the body keeps the only score that matters. I mean, when we're talking about reliving the physical reality, y'all. So the harmonic function for this one is somatic verdict. The individual field receives direct feedback through breath, digestion, sleep, posture, joints, shoulders, chest, nervous system response. The external field leaves less buffer for energy misuse, unclear commitments, and patterns that override the body's actual truth. So, this theme may show up through the body becoming more immediate, more precise, and less willing to be overridden. Breath, digestion, sleep, posture, shoulders, jaw, stomach, sternum, joints, back body, nervous system response. All these may become messengers. The body's not being difficult, it's providing evidence. It may show where something fits, where something costs too much, where a boundary is needed, where rest is overdue, where the schedule can the schedule no longer supports the field. Where the mind has been arguing with what the body already knows, June asks the mind to stop arguing with the body's clarity. So, where the mind has been arguing with what the body already knows, June is asking the mind to stop arguing with the body's clarity. Not every sensation is a crisis. That needs to be said. This is not about becoming afraid of the body. This is not about interpreting every ache as a sign. This is not about noticing repeated information, patterns, consistent signals. Oh, sorry. Let me say that again. I'm This is not about interpreting every ache as a sign. This is about noticing repeated information, patterns, consistent signals. So the way sometimes when I'm sharing, the guides will come in and just be like, "Oh, just say that again clearer." So that's what happened. The way your body responds around certain people, places, obligation, decisions, schedules, and forms of work. It's giving you information. A tight sternum may be information. A clenched jaw may be information. Digestive disruption may be information. Shoulder tension may be information. Exhaustion after certain interactions may be information. A deeper breath may be information. A softer stomach may be information. A grounded feeling in the feet may be information. The body becomes a place where structural light truth becomes practical because the body often tells the truth before the mind has finished negotiating. So, I also just want to share, like, for me, going through April and May, there was a lot of stress at times. And as I moved into my experience of perimenopause and now menopause, and my hormones have shifted, I had a lot of inflammation years ago, and I went to my doctor, I went to specialists, I rheumatologist now, and in it came out that I have undifferentiated connective tissue disorder. And I do work with the spirit doctor team. I do a lot of energy work on it, and I have not had a flare up in 2 years. And I'm not on any kind of like currently, I was not on any kind of like ongoing medication for my autoimmune. I had been, I did a lot of research into it. I was, eating a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. I did a lot of research on menopause and, for like 2 years trying to understand how the body changes, what the body needs. And I also found out as your hormones are decreasing in menopause, it can cause more inflammation. And also in my family history, there is autoimmune as well, just autoimmune things as well. And so things needed to be clear in terms of the ancestral field, et cetera, et cetera. And so I do a lot of energy work on that. I've done like in the past personal herbal prescriptions, but I do work with a rheumatologist. And I'm sharing this because I'm an equal opportunist when it comes to healthcare, especially for the physical body. I do work with the spirit doctor team, I ask them. And so during this extreme time for me in April and May, in terms of mom passing and everything else that was like flooding through processing, I had a flare up of inflammation, and again, this is again, June came in May for me. And so this theme, physical proof, the body keeps the only score that matters. I had a point in terms of being in the month of May, where the inflammation was it was just really intense at one point where um my right index finger, I could not actually really bend it. And now I can bend it. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see me bending my fingers, but I could not do this like a week ago. Especially with this right index finger. I could not do this. And so I did reach out to my rheumatologist, but I couldn't get an appointment till like mid-June, and I was like, I really need to see someone sooner than that. I reached out to my general doctor, and I got in right away, and I went on to medication that can support in terms of reducing the inflammation, which made a difference. It made a difference within a day. And if you've ever had experience of inflammation in the body, it is so incredibly painful. And also it can cause more challenges if you let the inflammation go further. And so even though I share this, because even though I'm working with the spirit doctor team and I'm doing energy work, we are living in physical bodies, y'all. We are living in physical bodies. And I'm going to do a podcast episode more so on this. But I had an experience when I was back on the East Coast during my mom's funeral, where somebody was having a hot flash, and they were talking about menopause. And so then I started sharing some of the research that I've done, and I was very delicate in the way I was sharing it, because I recognize, you know, this person in terms of some of their beliefs and how they're regarding the medical system now. And so I shared all the research I done, and I shared how with menopause I now have this autoimmune, and and I also read the research about how going on hormone therapy could actually be beneficial for people who have inflammation, and it can reduce it and can help it. And so I was like, oh, maybe that can help in terms of the inflammation, which then can help my autoimmune, which when I went on hormone therapy, there was a huge shift where I did feel better, and I have not had a flare up in like 2 years like this. And so um as I finished what I was sharing in terms of my experience, oh, this is going to make me actually cry. This person like put their hand in my face as like the stop sign and just said, I rebuke that in the name of Jesus Christ. And it just was so shocking to me and sad for so many reasons, because I had just also shared like a deeply personal story. And I know what it's like to want to rebuke something. And also, though, I understand from energy work and from living in this physical world, there are certain things that you do have to support yourself on, and that we can become so against getting help for the physical body that this person who was having a hot flash was going to maintain being in suffering and rebuking, talking even more so about menopause, or some of the things that the studies have produced in terms of how hormone therapy can help, and rebuke it in the name of Jesus Christ. Like, what? It was so it just was it just and so it's interesting because that was in April, and then when this theme came through for June, physical proof the body keeps the only score that matters. It was so clear and precise, because I've also been processing. I knew in that moment when this person shared it in the way they did, I was like, "Oh, this is a pretty big moment." And I was like, wow. And we're going to talk more about this in the coming weeks, because there has become in some ways this like anti helping the body, and that yes, prayer, support, meditation, energy work, all this stuff can help you. But the thing is, though, the guides are also working through people that are doctors, nurses, people that are coming up with different, maybe they're an herbal practitioner, or maybe they are somebody who's working in the pharmaceutical world that is beneficial. Things aren't right, wrong, good or bad. It's the business of isness. And you are living in a physical body. And it is your job that you've accepted this physical proof that the body keeps the score that matters. You're living in the physical body. And it is your responsibility to take care of the physical body. And you can't wish away or pretend something's not happening. And I don't know why we want to keep being in suffering and continue this cycle of just ignoring the pain that you're in and continuing being in suffering. You're in suffering. And so I had to sit there watching someone that I care about just sit in suffering of the hot flash. Hot flashes are painful. They had multiple hot flashes during when I was with them, and they're just in suffering. They're in suffering. There's not a willingness to help yourself, and there's sometimes a mindset so against receiving support for the body. And so I share that because the body keeps the only score that matters. And the theme this theme shows up through the body becoming more immediate, more precise, and less willing to be overridden. And so when I sat there with inflammation in my body for like days, and every day I woke up and I could move my right index finger less and less. It was so painful. And if anything hit on the side of my finger, I was like, oh my goodness, the shooting pain through my arm. And I was like, "Oh, am I gonna keep ignoring this, or am I gonna, like, call my doctor?" I mean, yeah, I mean, I was using my tools, but I was like, "Oh, this is a clear sign," which there's more to it. There was things that was processing from the loss of my mom, the ancestral field, which I'll get into that in another podcast, what the right index finger means. There was a lot of, other things happening. But am I gonna just sit and collapse and ignore and just sit in suffering? Or am I going to allow myself to receive help and call a doctor? I'm an equal opportunist when it comes to Western and Eastern medicine and anything that can beneficially support for the highest good for the body. I do work with the spirit doctor team. I do always ask, like, what is beneficial in terms of taking, is this beneficial? What is I'll ask for percentages, and then before I take anything, whether it's, you know, prescribed herbal medication or vitamins or, medication, I'll do a whole Reiki dowsing session to clear it and ask for the vibration to be raised and ask to be supported by my guide team. I do a whole process with that, and just supporting. We are living It's very complicated, this experience that we're in, this multidimensional experience, light and physical format. And it's a very, very complicated experience. But to me, also part of this is allowing yourself to evolve mentally, emotionally, physically, allowing yourself to be supported, and also with that, letting yourself then show up for yourself. And that is when this person did this experience, put the hand in my face and said, "I rebuke that in the name of Jesus Christ." I was so shocked and just so sad at the same time. Like, what are we what are we doing here? What is happening? How can we have so much modernization in so many ways and also yet like just be so stuck in some ways that you're not wanting to get help for yourself, and that you are completely collapsing in survival and suffering, and and you're not wanting to let yourself shift into thriving in a healthier experience for your human. What is happening here? And so, with that, this theme is really physical proof the body keeps us the only score that matters, and letting yourself receive support. And so, this theme may show up in many different ways, like breath, digestion, sleep, posture, shoulders, jaw, stomach, sternum, joints. Mine was showing up in my joints, back body, nervous system response. All these may become messages, and the body is not being difficult. It is providing evidence. It may show where something fits, where something costs too much, where a boundary is needed, where rest is overdue, where maybe something's processing from your ancestral field. There has been a passing of someone and there's something being completed, where rest is overdue, where the schedule no longer supports the field, where the mind has been arguing with what the body already knows. Or maybe there's some sort of outdated belief. Maybe that's come to a completion and you're being called to expanded consciousness on something else, a new reality in terms of realizations. We're here to learn, grow, and evolve. So June asks the mind to stop arguing with the body's clarity. I did not expect to get emotional on this part where it just, that experience. So June asked the mind to stop arguing with the body's clarity. Not every sensation, though, is a crisis that needs to be said. This is not about becoming afraid of the body. This is not about interpreting every ache as a sign. And I know I'm repeating myself, but it's so important, or at least feels very important to me right now. This is about noticing repeated information, patterns, consistent signals, the way your body responds around things, certain people, places, obligations, decisions, schedules, forms of work, or just how your body feels. Maybe you are going into perimenopause, menopause. Maybe your hormones are shifting. Maybe you're at a different stage. I know we all remember back at times like, when you're a teenager maybe, when you're in your 20s, but maybe now you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s. We're here to learn, grow, and evolve. And there's many phases of life. There's many phases of the body. And a tight sternum may be information. A clenched jaw may be information. Digestive disruption may be information. Shoulder tension may be information. Exhaustion after certain interactions may be information. And I'm going to say this because also within this, um, I had someone else, another loved one, say to me in the same experience, like about menopause, like they've not gone to the doctor since 2019 or 2020. There's sort of like a in with a few of these people that I care about and I love, there is sort of a mentality of anti Western medicine, medical world, and and a a boasting of I haven't gone to the doctor since then. And I eat healthy and I exercise. But just because you think you look healthy does not mean your organs are actually healthy. And also, it doesn't mean that you don't have things that you've carried from your ancestors. And so within this, my paternal lineage have had things in terms of like heart stuff, like heart disease and things like that. And so this person that had said that is from my dad's side of the family. And just like, just after my mom's funeral, like a week later, one of my cousins, that from my paternal lineage, he died of a massive heart attack. And a couple days before, he had not been feeling well. And so again, it's like, y'all, the physical proof, the body keeps the only score that matters. And so my cousin, he had a massive heart attack and he passed away. And I can't tell you like the concern that it has brought for me in terms of some of my other like loved ones, my family members, where you're boasting about not having gone to the doctor since 2019, 2020, or wherever it was, and being anti ever getting help and thinking that you're completely like fine when I hope you are and I want you to be. But that's also very like your body needs things. Your body needs support and help. Your body can be changing on a day-to-day basis. And you could be in denial of receiving support. And so, a couple things. One, it doesn't surprise me that in this life altering moment that I was also in these conversations because obviously I was already receiving even in April the themes that were going to come through for June and the reality of the real of why we need to talk about these things because I one of my things I do often ask in my Reiki dusting sessions if it comes up and it's appropriate, like when's the last time you've gone and had a physical or a wellness exam? And I can't tell you how many times I've had to encourage people, in the US, usually you get one full wellness exam physical a year with all the labs and things like that. I don't know how it works in other countries, but it's like if you have insurance and you're paying for insurance, use that because if you're not, you are then also putting yourself in lack for not using resources that you're paying into. And so no matter how much you think the system is broken or what you think about it, it doesn't mean the body doesn't deserve to see where it's at in terms of, some markers in terms of blood tests or something else that might be coming up that may signal that you need support because your body is processing mentally, the emotionally, the somatically, and it's out there in the world. Your mind may not be present, but your physical body is. It's showing up even if you're not feeling fully present in your body. Your body does so much work for you. And so that's where really taking care of yourself is so, so important. The lights are going on and off in my house, and the guys are like, okay, you can wrap it up. I gotta wrap it up. But I'm very passionate about this topic, and we're gonna continue, y'all, because we need to talk about these things and you're human, your body deserves support. Um okay, so with this then, all of this can be information. Exhaustion after certain interactions may be information, a deeper breath may be information, a softer stomach can be information, a grounded feeling in the feet, all that's information. My inflammation was information. And the body becomes the place where structural light truth becomes practical because the body often tells the truth before the mind has finished negotiating. My body was definitely letting me know. And so then, after a couple days of ignoring it, I definitely reached out and got support. And look, now I can move my fingers and I feel great. And I also know that, I'm going to see my rheumatologist in mid-June and, just talk about other things that I maybe need to do to support my physical body at this point in this stage of my life. So here's the reality check. Digestive changes, nervous system activation, shoulder tension, headaches, joint discomfort, or fatigue may trace back to blurred lines. It could also be tracing back to like something in your ancestral field. It could also be tracing back to something that wasn't processed at another time or past lives or changes in your physical body in this new stage of what you may need now. Spacious breath often signals coherence. Tightness in the sternum, jaw, stomach, or back body may signal energetic cost. The body may respond faster than the mind can rationalize. I know part of my experience, there was a lot of stress I was moving through in terms of my mom passing and then the grief and like all the things that you have to do. And so I was doing energy work and meditation and dowsing, but I didn't do as much as I normally do or maybe could have done in terms of my nervous system. And then I also was not eating very well. I was not eating well. So that was also part of it for me. Um, so with this for you, like just check in to see what you need. And, the body may respond faster than the mind can rationalize. Schedule changes or experiences like I just mentioned, I went through cleaner posture, fewer obligations, and more honest pacing may create more relief than another mindset shift. Physical feedback becomes a practical guidance system for what can continue and what needs to change. And so the takeaway for this is um, when the body gives clear information, listen. Stop overriding the signal and rebuild from what supports coherence. So, this is the final theme because the body becomes the confirmation point. After completion is revealed, resources are clarified, boundaries become simpler, and work begins asking for integrity. The body confirms what can actually continue, not through mental debate, through direct signal. And so, with that, you know, before we wrap up this, the June 4-part harmonic arc. So, the month of June unfolds through the 4-part harmonic arc, which is structural completion, resource clarification, integrity enforcement, somatic confirmation. So, that then is the internal movement of the month. The first is structural completion. What has completely stopped quietly, what is completed what is completed stops quietly extending itself. And then it goes into resource clarification. The hidden cost becomes visible. And then it goes into integrity enforcement. Boundaries, agreement, and work structures require clearer terms. And then it goes into somatic confirmation. The body confirms what the field already knows. So June then asks very four simple questions. What is completed? What is it costing? What needs clearer terms? What does the body confirm? That is the month. Not overcomplicated, not abstract, very practical. June is not the month of dramatic rupture. It is the month where reality stops allowing unclear continuation to remain energetically hidden. This month does not ask you to abandon what is true. It asks you to stop over supporting what cannot move forward as it is. So, with that, then, how June evolves from May. May was form beginning. It was the first visible stage where reality began taking shape around the stabilized soul signal. It revealed movement becoming more practical, support becoming more tangible, timing becoming more coherent, relational truth becoming easier to feel. Old loops losing reinforcement, form beginning to gather around what is already stabilized internally. But visible form by itself does not yet mean coherent continuation. It does not yet mean everything that appeared can remain. It does not yet mean every opening is aligned long term. It does not yet mean every agreement, rhythm, project, or support system can carry the next phase without refinement. June begins where May's visible reorganization has already occurred. So this arc is not about proving that reality is responding. That already began. June is about what reality reveals once response becomes structurally accountable. Not response, viability, not movement, sustainability, not visible correspondence, structural light truth. The central movement of June is not that the field begins to answer you. That already happened in April and became more visible in May. June is where the field begins showing what can actually move forward without draining the human system. And that is why the month may feel direct, not harsh, direct. June brings the grace period to completion because the field is no longer only showing possibility. It is showing cost, capacity, coherence, and consequence. And this is where light format stops being only internally stabilizing and begins becoming structurally discerning. What cannot hold the signal becomes harder to carry. What requires repair becomes harder to avoid. What needs a boundary becomes harder to soften. What has completed becomes harder to extend. What the body knows becomes harder to override. This is not loss. This is structural light truth entering the field. So, for practical guidance for June, the guide suggests this. First, list the leaks: time, money, energy, attention, emotional, mental, physical labor, nervous system capacity. Where is it going? Second, choose one non negotiable each week, not 21. One clear boundary, one clear agreement, one repair, one release, one simplification. Third, cut the polite stall. Deliver direct answers on pending conversations, kindly, mindfully, clearly, compassionately, without 5 extra paragraphs. With one clean sentence will do. 4, match resources to reality. Reprice, rescope, reorganize, repair, release, simplify. Update the structure so the work, relations, or commitment can actually continue with coherence. 5th, let endings be quiet. No rescue missions for what is already complete. No need to dramatize completion. No need to make closure mean failure. Sometimes something served its function. Sometimes something was true for a season. Sometimes something was meaningful and still complete. Sometimes the most respectful thing is to let it finish. And here are harmonic anchor phrases for June. You can repeat after me if this resonates with you. And you may want to work with these phrases throughout the month. Here we go. Take a nice deep breath before we start. I do not force clarity. Reality reveals what is already structurally true. I do not preserve what drains my signal. I allow completion without making it failure. I let hidden costs become visible without shame. I say what is true with simple language. I allow healthy boundaries to support compassion. I let my work structure reflect my integrity. I do not confuse overextension with devotion. I listen to the body before it has to become louder. I do not find, I do not, I do not fund ambiguity through my nervous system. I allow what is alive to repair. I allow what is complete to release. I let structural light truth become practical in my life. So take a nice deep breath on that. And this is going to be the closing of the forecast for the podcast and for YouTube. But if you are in the all access dowsing, we're going to be doing that. Okay, so with the closing, then we gather the 5 themes together and June becomes very clear. We see structural end dates, what is completed stops quietly extending itself, energy budget audits, hidden costs become visible, hard boundaries, simple language, no more negotiating basic needs, work that works, output matches integrity, physical proof, the body keeps the only score that matters. This is June. It's not asking you to become more spiritual. It's asking you to become more honest about what your body, field, time, energy, and life structure are already showing. It's not asking you to force the next structure. It's asking you to stop over supporting what cannot move forward as it is. It's not asking you to create truth. It's asking you to recognize where light truth has already become structural. So before, again, we move into that dusting session for the all access for the Patreon, take a nice deep breath. Inhale, I allow what is completed to complete. Exhale, I release the need to keep extending what drains my signal. Again, inhale, I allow hidden costs to become visible without shame. Exhale, I call my life force back from what no longer sustains coherence. And let's do a couple more breaths. Inhale, I say what is true with simple language. Exhale, I let my actions support the clarity. And one more breath. Inhale, I listen to the body before it has to become louder. Exhale, I allow structural light truths to become practical in my life. One more breath. All right. All right, y'all. So for those listening to the public version, thank you for being here and receiving the June 2026 energy forecast. Here is the crystalline Reiki blessing. May your field recognize what has completed without making completion a failure. May your body reveal what is costly before it has to become louder. May your boundaries become simpler. May your boundaries become simple, compassionate, and clear. May your work structure reflect your integrity. May what is alive repair. May what is complete release. May what is true become simple enough to live it. And again, for those staying for the dowsing energy healing session, we're going to move into that dowsing in a moment. That's available to the all access members. And that this session will support structural completion, resource clarification, integrity enforcement, somatic confirmation, and the release of non-beneficial patterns that keep the releasing non-beneficial patterns that keep the body funding ambiguity, overextension, unclear agreements, outdated work structures, incompleted forms that are ready to repair, release, reorganize for a full recalibration. And to the public, to anyone listening in the public, if you wish to join and have access to that, I will put the link for the all access Inspiring You Patreon in the show notes. Until then, my friends, we are complete with this public version. Much, much love. Until soon, stay inspired, my friends.